What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here, back with JaboctheGreat. Welcome to another episode of The Last Word. Getting back into some NBA discussion. As you can see by the title, the biggest topic right now in the NBA, the Philadelphia 76ers, man, they are, to say the least, a mess. Right now, they have the worst record, and not just the East, but the worst record in the entire NBA, slightly beating out the Utah Jazz. They are 2-12. They have been on two 5-game losing streaks. They're currently on their second one. And look, we understand there's been a lot of injuries with them. Obviously their top three guys. Maxi's been injured. He just came back. Joel Embiid, just coming back the last 5 or 6 games or so. Paul George missed time. I get that. They've been awful. And Paul George, he has the podcast. Reports been coming out about the team. Like, it's just been a whole lot of nonsense for the Sixers. And even with the injuries, they should not be this bad. Their only 2 wins this season are in overtime against Charlotte, overtime against Indiana. I mean, they have just not been good. And usually in the NBA, we shouldn't just give up on a team so early on, but I would say they got to do something real fast to kind of get over whatever they got going on.
Yeah, I mean, so my roommate, which is a good mutual friend of both of ours for a very long time, was a Sixers fan, and for a little bit as a Bucks fan, we were kind of obviously the Bucks beat them in the first game, and then we get kind of to suffer together for a little bit. But as the Bucks have, they're still not great, but they started to pick it back up. The Sixers have continued to fall, and it's made the conversations, I feel, a little more less like on equal ground and more like I'm like, dang, I'm sorry, man. Like, it's I don't know what's going on. Injuries were tough for sure. But now you got your guys coming back and the offense honestly just kind of looks discombobulated. Like, it's like, well, now we have Embiid, so what do we do with McCain and Paul George is here and Maxi's back around, but like, who's going to handle the ball? And then Paul George extends his knee again, which is like, all right, well,
Yeah.
that's over. And they played some tough wins and tough losses here, or played some tough teams. Like, all right, you start off with Milwaukee, which is on day one of the NBA season that people would assume is a tough team. It did not turn out to be so, and they lose that game, which is not great. And you played Memphis and Phoenix and the Clippers and the Lakers all back to back. That's really tough. You think maybe you get a break with Charlotte, and you kind of do, but it takes overtime to get there. And then you go New York, Cleveland, Orlando, Miami, Memphis, all also tough teams for sure. But some of these games the Sixers should be winning. I mean, the Detroit Pistons are pretty good this year. They're fighting a lot harder. They took the Bucks a pretty long mile. So I'm not going to talk too heavy on the Pistons negatively. But that's a game you could probably win. You could hopefully maybe steal one from the Clippers. If you can beat the Pacers, I feel like you can beat the Raptors. The Sixers just don't look together. And you see some of the reports coming out, right, with Maxey saying that Embiid's late to everything, and then Embiid being mad that got out, and then Paul George getting on his podcast and with Reggie Jackson and yapping about the meeting and stuff. And it's like, I've made a lot of jokes about Draymond making his podcast episodes right after a playoff loss, or even sometimes right after a playoff win. And Draymond will do it throughout the season as well. It's not just in the playoffs, but like, maybe podcast B's got to hang it up until you're not 2-12. Maybe you need to, well, his knees hurt again, so I mean, there's not much he can do now. So, welcome back to the podcast realm. But it is just really tough. There's a lot going on outside of basketball. They've got a great shining star in Jared McCain, who is their leading scorer right now in points per game with like 15 points. And unfortunately, you got guys like Paul George kind of like Freudian slipping and being like, yeah, like McCain can't be our most efficient guy. And it's like, ooh, can't is not the word you should use there. Like, it shouldn't be. Sure, he's a rookie.
Yeah.
You got a guy who's been an MVP. Paul George himself has been deservedly been up in those conversations. Maxey has been great. So yeah, if you want to say like shouldn't be, or like we should be helping him out more, that's good. But to come out and be like, nah, McCain shouldn't be the guy, is like, all right, good one, buddy. So yeah, this is a longer rant than I intended, but the Sixers just look discombobulated. They look like they're lost. The injuries are tough. That's really bad. But they got to get mentally back together too. And coming up, you got a game against Brooklyn, who I think executively thinks they're trying to tank, but Dennis Schroeder is playing really well. Maybe trying to get traded. Maybe he's just most players don't actually want to lose basketball games. Fun fact. So that's going to be a tough one. Then you get the Clippers, Rockets, who we'll talk about soon. Pistons, who you've already lost to. Charlotte, who you almost lost to. Orlando. Chicago, who you could probably beat, and then Charlotte, Cleveland, the Spurs. It's gonna be a rough next few weeks as we head into the new year. Rounding out the year for the Sixers after those games is Boston on Christmas, then Utah, who hopefully you can beat, and Portland, who you also should maybe be able to beat. So gonna be tough. The Sixers got to get it together. I know there's a lot of health issues. I'm not gonna fault them for the injuries. That's just a really tough scenario. We talked before the video about the Pelicans. They're in a worse situation injury-wise, but do have a better record. Um, but the Sixers, I think, have got to mentally get it together. And Nick Nurse has maybe got to get a little more serious about like what's going on. You got to find some more efficient offensive patterns with your guys. Paul George's going to be out for a bit now. You got to work around that. And defensively, you got to do a little better too. I mean, they haven't been horrible defensively. Nobody's put up like crazy amounts of points except for the first game that they played with the Bucks in the first game against the Grizzlies. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of mental things going on here, and the Sixers just don't look like they know that they're a good team, and I think they gotta get that back under them.
Yeah, and with Paul George, I feel like he was saying what you were saying. The second option there, like, hey, he
Yeah,
shouldn't have to be that guy for us. He's like, it's more of like a man. He can't like be that guy for us. Like he's gotta we've gotta help him out more.
yeah,
And you're right, buddy. Like, yeah, you gotta help out your rookie. Like especially considering you have three all stars on your team, all NBA type guys. Like you should be playing a lot better. And I understand injuries, but it is that's the game, man. I mean, that's the NBA. That's what the game is. We say this every single year. If there are going to be injuries, it happen. You got to overcome them. Still not really an excuse for them to be 2-12 this early into the season. Positive news though, the Magic, and they have had an injury. Obviously, Paolo Banchero's he's been out for most of the season essentially, and they had a bad stretch. Right after he went out, they lost four
yeah.
games after that, but they've been really good since then. Basically only losing one of their last 7 or 8, so they've been great. They are number 4 right now in the East at 10-7. And really, I mean, after Orlando, there's a huge drop off in the East. I mean, it's the Cavs, it's the Celtics, it's the Knicks, Orlando. Huge drop off. The East. We always talk about the East being the weaker conference, and that's been proven consistently. And I understand Boston just won the title, but overall, the East is a lot worse than the West is generally. And if you look at the number 10 spot in the West, I mean, you got the Wolves and then the Kings. They're at 8-7, at 10-11 in the West. The 5 spot in the East, 6-7 in the Heat. So I mean, it's the same crap. But Orlando, they've been playing pretty well so far this season. And obviously, when Banchero does get back at some point, they'll be able to continue to playing that way. And before I get to Cleveland, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on Orlando since this was your thing. But Cleveland was a matchup for them in the past in the playoffs. Will they beat them this time? Maybe, maybe not. Cleveland this year has been really good, exceedingly good. But still, I think that one might be a fun one if it does end up happening again somehow.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great playoff matchup, and I think that's a good way to kind of merge between these topics here. But I think obviously the Magic start really strong. They get 50 out of Banchero to beat the Pacers, and then Banchero gets hurt the next game against the Bulls, which they lose narrowly. And from there, it looks like okay, well it's over because then they lose to Cleveland, which is a horrible matchup to have right after you just lost your star. At that point, Cleveland is 6-0, 7-0, somewhere around there, maybe 5-0. Not going to be great. Then you get Dallas, not good. Then you get the Pacers, not good. Then you get Indiana, who you just dropped 50 on a little bit ago. They're not going to be very happy about that. That's not good. Now you're 3-6 when you just were 3-1. Really not good. And then something just like changes. They get a little bit of an easier team with the Pelicans hospital room, and then Wagner starts to go, hey, wait a minute, we are good without Paolo. Like Paolo is definitely a big part of this team, but we can win basketball games. They win 6 in a row, get up to 9-6 from 3-6, and then drop a tough one to the Clippers. But they beat tough teams, like the Pacers again, like the Hornets, who've been really feisty. They put them down. I mean, that's a blowout game. They beat the Suns, which is big. Drop a narrow one to the Clippers, and then last night, Franz Wagner hits a big game winner in LA against the Lakers after some mishaps for the Lakers in the fourth quarter. So definitely a resilient team with Paolo back. I think they've got a good chance to be a lot feistier against the Cavs in a potential playoff matchup. But also, that would assume that the Cavs are the exact same as last season. And as I said with the Sixers, where it kind of seems like they forgot that like they're a good basketball team. It's almost like the Cavs forgot that they're kind of like on paper just one of like the middle of the pack teams, and we're like, nah,
Right.
like we're better
Yeah.
than you. And they're entering every game with a we're going to beat you mindset, and it's working for the most part, except for one game so far, which we'll talk about in just a second here. Um, so I think that's still a very good playoff matchup. I think it'd be really fun to have the Magic and Cavs match up again, especially if they have more of a I guess like a ready to go NBA Paolo, who wasn't bad in his first years anyway, but definitely is looking amazing so far this year before injury. And if they have the Wagner brothers playing well, they have Goga Badatse and Jalen Suggs playing this well. I think it'd be a great matchup. I'd probably take the Cavs still, but that's going on the fact that one of those teams right now is 16-1 and the other one's 10-7. I think that's maybe a little bit skewing my choice if we're thinking about the playoffs here. But I think it'd be really fun. I just think the Cavs have got a great mindset, and they've been playing really good team basketball. And the Magic have been doing that same thing to be able to overcome the loss of Paolo Banchero. You let Franz Wagner kind of remember that, like, oh wait, I was the guy here for just a little bit. So I think the Magic are fun. It is crazy. You are correct when we say that the East is the worst conference. But we're going to talk about 3 Eastern Conference teams here in this video. But it is insane to look at the 10-7 Magic, who've played a few more games than the next guy down, and then you drop to the Heat, who are 6-7. And if you put the Heat in the West, they would be like the 14th seed, or like the 13th, I think. So it's a little funny to see the East drop off. It is just the top four, and then it's a dogfight to try to get a winning record. But the Magic have got one despite having no Paolo Banchero, and I think it's the Cavs who we're about to talk about are extremely impressive for what they're doing, and the Magic to kind of take that injury, take a 5-game loss streak, and then go, wait a minute, this isn't right, and kind of turn it back around to end up 10-7. Also really impressive. They got a feisty Detroit team coming up tomorrow. I think that one will be fun.
Yeah, and the Cavs, I mean, they started on that great run to begin the season, man. They went 15-0, and I remember, we were talking about this. I remember we did our first NBA video. They started undefeated. It was like 5-0, and somebody said that they weren't scary. I'm not saying they're going to win the championship because look, it's kind of what you said. This I don't want to say it's a mid roster, but it's
Yeah.
you're expecting them to be more kind of at best like three, kind of where they were last year, 4 or 5. You know, no worse than 5, I would say, but
Yeah.
nobody expected them to come out and be the number 1 seed to start, and definitely not be undefeated through 15 games. But they have come out and they have played, above what they really are. And look, I think it's fair to have some trepidation, maybe, saying, hey, look, maybe the Cavs shouldn't be this good. But look, at some point, if they keep winning, because they had that loss against the Celtics, which was a tight game, and even though they came out with the L there, like you're playing the defending champs, it's okay. Like they're 12-3, not that big of a deal. If they keep playing like this, they keep winning, like they absolutely should be considered a threat in the East going forward. Now, unless they have some crazy injuries like Donovan Mitchell or something like that, he goes down, they fall off out of nowhere. Like I don't think it's really fair to say like, the Cavs aren't really that good because they're playing good teams too. So it's not like they're just going out there and beating up the dregs of the East every single day. Like they're playing good teams. They're playing teams that should be in the playoffs. I mean, they beat the Warriors, who are number 1 in the West right now. So like they're playing good teams. It's not like they're playing nobody. So I think it's fair to give them credit for how well they've played so far.
Yeah, and I think and I've watched a few Cav games, especially some of the Bucks ones, or some of the 2 Bucks games. I think at certain points I was kind of like, this is gonna. In the second Bucks game, I was like, this is gonna be just like the first one, and it was. But even when you look at like the Cavs on paper, you kind of get this feel of like the team ball thing that I'm talking about. Right? Like when I'm going through and talking about how bad the Sixers are right now. Like for the first half of the season, their highest scorer is Maxey, and then it switches to McCain, and then Embiid comes back and it's Embiid. For the Cavs, it's like every given night, like somebody else is going to be the leading scorer. And Donovan Mitchell is certainly their best player. But they are just a super well-rounded team that play very well off of each other. So you can have Evan Mobley lead you in scoring. You can have Dean Wade lead you in scoring. You can have Ty Jerome come in when you've got some injuries to handle the injured Pelicans for you. You have Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, all taken up. Mobley and Allen can help each other on the glass. Karis LeVert, sometimes when he remembers he's a good basketball player, can lead you in assists. Um, I think Karis LeVert is good, but I do think I agree with the now like infamous tweet where it's like Karis LeVert wakes up and spins a wheel to choose who he'll play like that day. Sometimes he does not play very consistently, but this year he has. And I think that's been the case for all of the guys. I think a lot of these guys have always had these things where it's like, this is a good basketball player at this when they like want to be, and then other times they just kind of look like they don't have the motivation. But Mobley has looked a lot more strong. I looked a lot more physical. Been a much better. I mean, he's already been a good defensive presence, but he's been a lot more of an anchor. Jared Allen has looked more confident. Donovan Mitchell looks like he's happy to be there, which is a benefit. And Darius Garland, who literally said, "I lost the love for basketball when he broke his jaw," has said like, "I got my joy back." So these guys are fun. Their loss against Boston is a tough one. They start really poorly. The start of that game, they just like weren't there. Boston came out and smacked them pretty hard. The Cavs came back, tried to make it a close game, and then Jason Tatum actually like literally smacked Donovan Mitchell very hard at the end of the game. And it ends up going Boston's way. But truthfully, like Boston had that game. They should have had it because the Cavs didn't show up in the beginning. But otherwise, like yeah, the Cavs have beaten a Charlotte Hornets team who've been pretty strong. They put up 150 on the Bulls. The Bulls aren't necessarily a good team, but they still put up 144 in regulation. Um, they beat the Warriors. They beat the Bucks twice. They beat the Lakers. They beat the Knicks. They beat the Magic. When they things have been pretty solid for this Cavaliers team. And I think I'm not going to take anything away from that. They've got some tough games coming up. Eventually, right? They're going to have to go Toronto, Atlanta. Then you get Boston again. Then you get Denver. Then Miami. Milwaukee, if you want to count that as a tough one. I'm not going to be too high on my team at the moment. And then you get Denver, Golden State, Los Angeles, Dallas. That's your run from the end of December into January, which is a tough one. And you get Charlotte, Oklahoma. So we're going to see this team continue to be tested. But as far as right now, they hit a 15-0 streak, took one loss, then immediately picked up another win. It was against the Pelicans team with like actually 0 starters. I don't know if Yves Missy is actually like one of their on paper starters when they're all healthy. I don't think so. So I do think they just beat a Pelicans team with no starters. But again, you play who's in front of you, you play who's put on the court in front of you. I think they'll keep up their winning streak at least through Toronto and the 2 games against Atlanta. I think they could get that one against Boston coming up on December 1st. But we'll see. I think that's going to be a good matchup every time it happens.
Yeah, now to actually switch over to the West to finish out here and talk about the superior conference. Houston Rockets, man, that young core, young group of guys over there, they are finally starting to put things together. And it's been a while coming now. I mean, the Rockets, they were obviously pretty awful. They were the dregs of the NBA with Steven Silas there for 3 years now. I mean, they were bad. And then under Ime Udoka now, obviously coming over from Boston because of reasons. They got them to 500 last year, 41-41, and now this year they are number 3 in the Western Conference. And again, a tight Western Conference, they would be right under the Celtics. So same spot, number 3 in the East, if they were in the East, but right under the Celtics there, and the Cavs, of course. And in the West, they are right above my Los Angeles Lakers and the Nuggets. So look, I we kind of talked about this last year. I think it was we talked about the Magic a lot, because the Magic, they were awful for a long time, pretty consistently. And seeing them rise up last year was fun to watch. Same this year with the Rockets. And this is kind of conversation we have the Cavs. Like, do I think they'll be able to make a run to the championship? Compared to the Cavs, I would say no right now. But to be fair, I mean, were we really sure that the Warriors are going to be where they kind of are now, after losing Clay last season? So I think, the West right now, the only team that I'm sure of would probably be the Thunder, because they have injuries right now and they're still 12-4. Chet's going to be out for a good bit. Jalen Williams, one of the Jalen Williams, hasn't played the entire season. Caruso just got injured, so I think the West is not really a surefire thing. I mean, even with the Lakers and Nuggets right behind them, but hey, maybe they might be able to make a run right now too.
Yeah, I think the Rockets have been really fun. They're super young. They're super athletic. They definitely put up a scary fight for me. Just last week or just the beginning of this week against the Bucks. We got that one by a point at the end of the game, so was definitely a little worried on that one. But they've quietly just kind of breezed through some tough teams. Right, they started their season with a loss to Charlotte, which is maybe put them on the radar. But then they beat up the Grizzlies. They drop one to San Antonio and then pick one up against San Antonio. Right after that, beat the Mavericks, lose to the Warriors in overtime, which is big. Warriors are currently leading out here in the West. They beat the Knicks. They beat the Thunder. Or sorry, they beat the Spurs. The Thunder beat them by a lot, which I think maybe sets it back, and you're thinking what just happened. And then they come back again. This Pistons team has been scrappy. They beat them. They take care of business against the Wizards. That should happen. And then they beat the Clippers twice, which I think is big. They put up 143 on the Bulls, which was just exciting to see a team again put up that many points in regulation. It is against the Bulls. Had that narrow loss to the Bucks, and then put up 130 against the Pacers. So I think they've been young. They've been kind of on fire, and it is nice. I'm used to. I'm not really used to it right now, but you can recall not that long ago to a James Harden Rockets. That's like this super fun kind of fired up team to watch, and then everything goes wrong for the Rockets. Everyone leaves, everyone goes somewhere else, and they end up in the Steven Silas era. That is horrible. And they kind of, through circumstances, steal Ime Udoka, and now they look great. So it's fun to see them be feisty. I'm not sure that I would trust them entirely to make like a massive playoff run. The West is always tough. It would just be definitely a difficult matchup. I think right now their matchup would be the Suns. That's hard, right? That's not an easy one for that young of a team to get through with as much as like veteran presence is there. Even though the Suns have their own issues, but it's just super exciting to see the Rockets be this good and be up there. Kind of legitimately, they played some tough teams, be up there ahead of people like the Lakers and Nuggets and Suns. I think that's pretty exciting. Don't know if it'll hold all the way through the end of the season, but it is pretty cool to see, and I hope that young core can kind of stay together and remain an exciting team.